Leviticus chapter 23, verse 24 is the operative scripture for this day. Speak to the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, in the 1st day of the month, that's today, you shall have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing of trumpets, a holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein, but you shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. Now, it's often been said that a little learning is a dangerous thing. And since the freeing of the slaves that took place in the church a few years back, and the adaptation of Strong's Concordance and all different versions of the Bible to computer Bible search programs, there has been an explosion of what I would call a little learning. People have noticed, for example, that the word trumpets is absent from the Hebrew text, and that the word for blowing can mean shouting. It can mean. It can also mean blowing on a trumpet, as a matter of fact. Never mind that thousands of years of tradition and every major translation makes it a blowing of trumpets. It is now, for some people, the feast of shouting. I'm having a hard time visualizing that. I sort of imagine a group of people standing around shouting. Just exactly how would you observe a feast of shouting is an interesting question for me. However, I will say this, that most of you, not all of you, but most of you have already been shouting since you got here. Because singing is a kind of shouting. It is an orderly, in tune, hopefully, in rhythm and in sync way of shouting out the praises and the glory of God. I remember seeing a television interview by, it wasn't Placido Domingo, it wasn't Jose Carreras, it was the third tenor. I can't think of his name right now, I've got a block on him. But anyway, he was saying, yes, Pavarotti. He was saying that whenever he first studied opera, the first thing in his voice lessons they didn't sing. He brought him in and had him shout. He had to learn how first to shout. And only after he learned how to shout was he able then to form the shout into a musical sound that could be heard without amplification, without any help whatsoever, in an opera concert hall, because opera was designed long before there was any electronic help, long before any of the modern musicals where they put a wire on their singers and they don't have to project. Long before that, opera was done in very large theaters without any help whatsoever. So the opera singers, the choruses all shouted the songs and brought them off the back wall of the theater. So the Feast of Shouting, I guess, in a sense, when you stand up and we all sing as we do, I guess, in a way, get to shout on this day. Now, if you haven't shouted yet, you will get another chance in the closing hymn today. There were two kinds of trumpets in Israel of old. One of them was the shofar, and all of us probably, is there anybody here, I'm not going to ask for show of hands, anybody here who has not seen the movie The Ten Commandments? I mean, I think by now surely every human being has seen that movie. If not, you'll get a chance come Christmas time or come Easter next year. But anyway, the shofar is the ram's horn that is blown, has a particularly mournful, long sound. But there was another trumpet that existed, and I don't know why people didn't pay much attention to this, because this is one of the developments in Israel. You'll find a reference to this in Numbers, the 10th chapter. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, make you 2 trumpets of silver, of a whole piece shall you make them, that you may use them for the calling of assembly and for the journeying of the camps. And when they shall blow with them, all the assembly shall assemble themselves together at the door of the tabernacle of congregation. But if they blow with one trumpet, then the princes, who are the heads of the thousands of Israel, shall gather to you. But when you blow an alarm, then the camps that lie on the east part shall go forward. When you blow an alarm the second time, the camps that are on the south side shall take the journey. They shall blow an alarm for their journeys. But when the congregation is to be gathered together, you shall blow, but you shall not sound an alarm. What's the difference? Well, by now I think all of us know the difference is that you can say you play some particular tune. Anyone who's ever been in the military knows the difference between reveille and taps. We also know chow call. We also know to the colors. We also know, the various and sundry calls that come out from time to time. You do a little duty on a ship or on a military base for a while, and after a while, you know what the call means. It's a sound on a trumpet or sound on a bugle, actually, in the military, that tells us what time it is, what it is we need to do, and those things at this time, at any given time of the day. Well, Israel had silver trumpet. The silver trumpet, I have little doubt, had a much higher pitch than the shofar, and probably could be heard a little further, and they would come off of the rocks and echo around, a piercing sound that would reach out to the farthest parts of the camp and tell people it's time to move, it's time to come in, it's time to assemble, it's time to go. The sons of Aaron the priests shall blow with the trumpets, and they shall be an ordinance for you forever throughout your generations. I know in years gone by people have inquired as to how it is that we don't blow trumpets on these days, and the old answer always was, well, we don't have the sons of Aaron to blow on those trumpets. In fact, this particular silver trumpet, this kind of silver trumpet, I don't think we have or even know particularly what they would be like if we did blow upon them. I think that almost any sort of trumpet, cornet, French horn, or anything else would serve as something to blow on this day. But that particular part of things we have never done. I say never done. It has been occasionally done when there were people around who could play the trumpet. And I have no idea whether there's anyone in here who could do that or not. The only times I have ever put those things to my lips and tried, nothing came out that sounds the least bit like Doc Severinsen. He said, if you go to war in your land against the enemy that oppresses you, you shall blow an alarm with the trumpets. You shall be remembered before the Lord your God, and you shall be saved from your enemies. Also, in the day of your gladness, your solemn days, the beginnings of your months, you shall blow with the trumpets over your burnt offerings and over the sacrifices of peace offerings, that they may be for a memorial before your God. I am the Lord your God. Now remember, when he talked about blowing the trumpets on this day, he said it shall be a memorial of the blowing of trumpet. This silver trumpet that was blown over the offerings as a memorial, I presume, was the trumpet that was blown on the Feast of Trumpets at this time. I have also little doubt that there was much celebration, much shouting, probably singing, and so forth in Israel at that time. So the Feast of Trumpets is a memorial. A memorial of what? That's the interesting question for me. You know, as we look at the holy days throughout the Bible, it's always been tempting for people to look at them and say, well, those are Israelite holy days. And they're memorials of the events in Israel's history. You know, the Passover and the days of unleavened bread all have very strong Israelite historical meanings to them. When you come to the Feast of Pentecost, there's not so much historical, it's more of an agricultural festival. And then, of course, the Feast of Tabernacles has its historical significance in dwelling in booths when they came out of Egypt. The Day of Atonement is rich in Jewish symbolism, but once again here, not so much historical. But all of the typology of that holy day is there for you to study, to think about, and to learn from. The Feast of Trumpets is, as far as the Old Testament is concerned, and any symbolism there, probably the quietest, the most barren of all the holy days when it comes to symbolism. There is no connection to agriculture, and there is no particular connection to Israel's history. There's no special connection to the Exodus. There's nothing special about what they have done, but it still is a memorial of the blowing of trumpets. This festival seems to fit in neither one of those places. And this leads me to think that the meaning of this holy day must be more prophetic than it is historical. If you'll recall, and those of you who had a chance to hear the sermon last year at the Feast of Tabernacles, the first day, I talked about how the holy days are like the layers of an onion, that you have on the surface the obvious sort of Jewish historical meaning. But as you begin to peel those layers back on the holy days, you begin to find not merely Jewish historical meanings, you begin to find salvation history. You begin to find prophetic history. You begin to find eschatological, that is end-time meanings to them. You find soteriological, that is salvation-oriented meanings. And Christological meanings, that is orientation to Jesus Christ and what he means. So these holy days are incredibly rich in their symbolism. Now here we come to this symbol, this particular one, and we ask ourselves, what might it possibly mean? The only place I know to go in the Bible to try to get a handle on the meaning of this particular day is the book of Revelation. For there is no place in the Bible where trumpets are so vividly brought forward with the significance as they are here. If you'll turn to the 5th chapter of the book of Revelation. John has been in vision ushered into the place of God's throne. And as he comes into this place, he sees God in vision, not in reality, but in vision, on his throne, the 24 elders all about them, and all of the glory of God that is there. And he says in chapter 5, verse 1, I saw in the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book, written within and on the backside, and sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, Who is worthy to open the book and to loose the seals of this book? And no man in heaven or in earth nor under the earth was able to open the book, neither to look therein. Now, I don't know what to make of this over the earth and under the earth. I have an idea this is nothing but an idiomatic expression which says we didn't find anybody, no matter where we looked, above the earth, below the earth, in the earth, around the world. No one was found who could either open this book or look at it. And I wept because no man was found worthy to open and read the book or to read what was inside this book. It's kind of a strange thing. He is in vision, and I don't know if you've ever dreamed and cried or wept in your dreams. I mean, it's the strangest feeling. You just cry your heart out. Your eyes are dry. Nothing's happening to you physically. Anybody watching you sleep would never know. But you can be crying your heart out. And I've done that once or twice in my life. And I think of John in this vision just weeping like his heart would break. No one can open this book. And one of the elders said, Don't cry. Look, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has prevailed to open the book and to loose the 7 seals thereof. So I looked, and behold, in the midst of the throne and the 4 beasts and the elders stood a lamb, as it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent forth into all the earth. Now, I think if you try to approach this thing literally and visually, you're going to really have a problem with this. I mean, a lamb with its throat cut, I suppose, bleeding, and with 7 horns and 7 eyes, it's the strangest thing. And I presume, John says that's what he saw, and I suppose that's what he saw. What you need to understand when you read through this is the concept of iconography. Iconography is the study of icons, and there's a use of icons to convey meanings to people under various circumstances. How many of you have computers? Okay. Well, if you operate on your computer, you already know what an icon is, because whether it's a Mac or an Apple or a PC, everybody now is using some Windows version of something that has across the top of the screen little pictures. Icons are just little pictures. They're not realistic pictures. They're just pictures that represent something. And so there's a little picture of a little tiny printer up there, and if you click on the printer, it's supposed to take you through the steps to print your document. That's an icon. And it doesn't look like really a printer very much. If you've been around bus stations, air terminals, other places and public places, and probably in your mall and what have you, you're also familiar with these little signs that show a man, or just a rough figure of a man, and a rough figure of a woman on those signs. And almost anybody could tell looking at them, one of them's a man and one of them's a woman. What do they mean to us? Men's room, women's room. In England, they would call them the toilets. Here we call them the restroom, where nobody goes to rest. But nevertheless, that's what they are. These are icons that they put on the wall, and they serve, I don't know where all this stuff comes from, but the beauty of them is they transcend language. You do not have to speak English. You do not have to be able to read even to be able to know where the men's room is if you're in an airport. And so it is with so many highway signs now have icons up them. They have icons to show us there's a hill ahead. They have icons to show us there's a foot crossing ahead. We're surrounded by icons all the time and think nothing of it. Well, in ancient history, there is a system really of icons, and the study of these through history as to what they meant at different times is fascinating. The winged fiery serpent meant something in ancient times. The lamb meant something in ancient times. And by this time for the church, a slain lamb had specific significance so that you didn't have to tell people what it was. They knew what you were talking about. The 7 horns, 7 eyes would have been understood probably by the church that first read his writing more quickly than many of us understand it today. We have to do research and study and go find out these things, and John was kind enough to tell us that the 7 eyes on this Lamb are the 7 spirits of God that go to and fro in the earth. They look and see, and this is the way in which God sees what is taking place in the world. So the symbolism that you read, and it's really worth your time if you're going to be serious in studying prophecy, to study the icons when you come to them, and rather than taking them as literal things and trying to interpret them literally, it's far more important that you look at them as icons and say, okay, what does that little shape mean? Because the truth is, if you've been on your computer very long, you come across icons that you don't recognize. And there are icons and little symbols in use that you say, what is this? And you click on it, and then you wish you had not clicked on it, as a lot of us have learned to our sorrow. So anyway, he sees a lamb as it has been slain with 7 eyes and 7 horns. And he came and took the book out of the right hand of him that sat upon the throne. And when he had taken the book, the 4 beasts and 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, having every one of them harps and golden vials full of odors, which are the prayers of the saints. Golden vials full of odors, which are the prayers of the saints. Your prayers are actually in the presence of God and are there as this is going on. And they sang a new song, saying, you are worthy to take the book, to open the seals thereof, because you were slain and hast redeemed us to God by your blood out of every kindred and tongue and people and nation, and hast made us unto our God kings and priests, and we shall reign on the earth. Behold, I heard the voice of many angels around the throne, the beasts, the elders, the number of them was 10,000, 10,000, and thousands of thousands, sing with a loud voice, worthy is the Lamb that was slain. His name power and riches and wisdom, strength, honor, glory, and blessing. And every creature which is in heaven and on the earth and in the earth, and such as are in the sea and all that are in them, heard I saying, blessing, honor, glory, and power be unto him that sits upon the throne, and to the Lamb, forever and ever. I don't know if you caught the rhythms and the cadences of my own reading of it, which come from the Messiah. I can't get them out of my head. It's a magnificent section. You can hear with a giant choir, but even the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, as large as it is only is it 100 people in that choir, or maybe 150 or so? This choir goes up into the millions and beyond the John's capacity to tell us, how many it was. I want to hear that. I really want to hear that. And then in Revelation 6, it says, I saw the Lamb open one of the seals. Now, I think if you study this through commentaries and so forth, almost everyone will say that what this is all about are the events leading up to the end of this age, the events that actually symbolize the end of this age. And we have studied them, to exhaustion, and trying to understand in some kind of detail, perhaps, what is going to happen as we approach the time of the end. Looking for detail is an exercise in futility. I'll just tell you before you start. Learn the iconography, learn the symbolism, yes, because that's important. But once you've come beyond this, you need to realize that what you're getting here is a painting with a very, very broad brush. And the more precise you are in your attempt to describe or visualize this, the more likely you are to be wrong. He says, I heard a sound like thunder, saying from one of the 4 beasts, saying, come and see. And behold, I saw a white horse, and he that sat upon him had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. And the funniest thing about this, I believe the first time in my life that I recall reading this, I've attempted to grasp it, I assumed that was Jesus. Somebody sitting on a white horse, and had a bow and a crown, and he's conquering, conquering the Messiah, is what I would have thought. But the presence of the bow, as opposed to the sword that is presented that Christ will have in Revelation 19, is a giveaway that something is wrong. It took someone to point out to me years ago the comparison in this with Matthew 24 and Olivet prophecy, so that I would understand the sequence of these things as they run right parallel to what Jesus said would happen at the end time. I'm not going to take the time today to try to go through that particular line with you, because that's along a different subject. Suffice it to say that what this is about is not about Christ. It's about false Christs, false prophets who go forth conquering and to conquer. He opened the second seal, and I heard a second beast saying, come and see. And there was another horse that was red, and power was given to take peace from the earth. They should kill one another. And he was given to him a great sword. So comes, first of all, false prophets, then comes war. Finally, he said, not finally, but next he said, he had opened the third seal. I heard the third beast say, come and see. And I looked, and a black horse. And he that sat upon him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts saying, a measure of wheat for a penny, 3 measures of barley for a penny. Careful with the oil and wine. What's this about? It's about famine. The fact that there is very little to eat. And everybody is counting out the grains of wheat. When he had opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth beast saying, come and look. And I saw a pale horse, and the name that sat upon him was Death, and hell followed him, and power was given to him over the fourth part of the earth to kill with the sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth. This is not what I call good times. These are the kinds of times that the Scripture tells us precede the return of Christ. And it took a while for it to soak in and realize that the return of Christ is very much a salvation event. That the return of Christ is necessary. If Jesus Christ did not return, what would happen to this world is ultimately the destruction of all flesh upon it. That's what we are looking at. One way or the other, it would all be over unless Jesus Christ returns and does something to keep that from happening. Then he opened the fifth seal, and I saw under the altar the souls of them which named the word of God and the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, how long, O Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? And white robes were given to every one of them, and said that they should rest and wait until their fellow servants and their brethren should be killed as they were, should be fulfilled. This is a little worrisome when you think about it, because what it tells us is, as we approach the end time, we're going to face incredible religious deception. We're going to face wars, rather widespread wars, famines, disease epidemics, widespread starvation, and severe religious persecution. Now, religious persecution is not going to be anything new. It's been going on for a long time, and it's going on as we sit here right now. There are Christians in different parts of this world being persecuted even as we speak. And you know, you need to pay attention to that. You need to read the stories of what these people are doing. Read the stories of what's happening to them, because you need to understand what is in the minds of men who hate the Christian faith. And there are more of them than there are of us by a long shot. I don't care what kind of Christian you are. And if they have their way, the kind of things that's going on in Sudan, the kind of thing that's going on in China, Indonesia, and other parts of the world of persecution of Christian people, where Christian people who just merely name the name of Jesus are sold as slaves on the auction block, where they are thrown in prison, where they are persecuted and tortured, these things will become, as we go to the end, much more widespread. What I read here is not a description of the world that you and I see out there right now. Oh yeah, we got wars and rumors of wars. Oh yeah, we got famines here and pestilence there. But the impression I get from this is that there comes a point in time where there is a change in the status quo of the earth, and it's when that first seal is broken open. So that I would expect that sometime in our future, our generation, the next generation, I have no idea of the timing of these things, because Jesus said to us, it's not for you to know that. It's for you to be ready whatever time it happens to be. But you know, I think it's a good thing when we're all driving up and down the road in our air-conditioned cars coming to church like this, and we're having lots and lots of food to eat here this evening, that this is not going to last. And that somehow or other we're going to have our sights, our minds, and our hearts fastened on something greater than this. Or else we're going to be very, very disappointed and years that lie ahead of us now. And your security is not going to lie. Have you stacks and cases of food in the closet or under your bed, your bed in the guest bedroom. Your security is not going to lie in jugs of water in your garage or in your storage room here and there. or because you filled up a few trash cans full of water, as you know, they're advising, some people are advising people to do for the year 2000 possible calamity that comes up. We're not going to be talking about something like that that you can prepare for 4 or 5 days to get through it. It's going to be much more serious than that. I'm not particularly trying to scare you. What I'm trying to point out for you is you really need to get clear in your mind what is important, what really matters. Because so many things that we give our lives and we give our attentions to just aren't going to last. And they aren't going to matter. And the time may not be that far ahead of us. You and I have no way to know. We are supposed to be ready no matter when. He said, then I watched, in verse 12, and they opened the sixth seal, and there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair. The moon became like blood. The stars of heaven fell to the earth like a fig tree casting her untimely figs when she's shaken of a mighty wind, and the heaven departed like a scroll when it's rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. This is something here, boy. This description really is powerful. Do you realize what it's describing? Let me finish the chapter. The kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, the chief captains, the mighty men, every bondman, every free man, hid themselves in the dens and the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us, hide us from the face of him that sits on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath is come, and who will be able to stand? I cannot at all tell you that I understand or know precisely what's going to happen. But this description is absolutely consistent with what they tell us not only has happened in the past in the earth, but is absolutely certain to happen again. It's talking about stars falling to the earth like a fig tree that is shaken by an untimely wind. You know, you got a bunch of ripe figs on the tree, but a big wind comes through, and you've got fig trees falling to the earth and a tattoo all over the ground beneath the tree. Do you have any idea what it will mean to this earth, to this planet you and I live on, whenever meteorites start pounding into us at that rate? We all had a real treat not long ago in watching a comet slam into, what was it, Jupiter, wasn't it, that a comet hit? And watched, and they were able through telescopes to get the whole picture of the thing together and enhance it so we could see it, the sequences of the blasts of the pieces of that comet coming into there. Jupiter is a huge planet. The first one of those pieces that hit Jupiter, had it hit the earth, would have been the end. Just one. Not two. Just one. But that thing got hit again and again and again. And it's really fascinating to me because it seems that we have had this last year, we had 2 new movies actually on comets, asteroids, or what they call extinction events. But I didn't realize how many there are. They have been running from time to time on some of the different classic channels of movies and what have you, repeatedly over the past year. There's a movie called Comet. There are others, I forget the names of all of them. One of them is called, I think, Asteroid. That I did not realize how many movies they have made. And by the time you get through, sitting through, they ought to run a marathon on them some weekend, one disaster asteroid movie after the other. By the time you get through looking at those things, and then you flip over to the Learning Channel, and you see a program that is not fiction. This is no fictionalized, acted-out movie. This is scientists talking about problems. And they tell you it is not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. And you realize that the time will come when one of those things does slam into our planet. And then they showed me the other night, that one of the programs I was watching, and this was, I think, on the Learning Channel about asteroids. And it was showed a computerized image of what happens when one of those things of a certain size hits the Earth. And the great plume and cloud of dust that goes up, makes its way quickly around the Earth, is not at all unlike what you hear here. An earthquake. And there would be. You would feel it everywhere. And the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon was like blood. And the stars of the heaven fell to the earth like a fig tree casts her untimely figs when she's shaken of a mighty wind. And the heaven departed like a scroll, and it's rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. I have no idea what it was like when that big one hit down at Yucatan. There's some interesting stories. Even the shape of the continent down there is affected by the size of this thing. There were people who can tell you the story of what it was like up in Siberia when that one up there hit. They are just staggering in the power that comes in them, and these are small. These are small. I mean, these things come in the size of an automobile by the time they get to the ground, they do incredible damage over very wide areas. And they tell us that some of these things can be a half mile or 5 miles in diameter. And that is what, in one of the movies recently, they did a very good job of telling you what it was all about. It is an extinction event. It means you get that, there is no life left on the planet. What is described here is less than that. What is described here is a shower of the things of a certain size, of sufficient size to turn the sun black, to turn the moon to blood, to create a terrible disaster as far as the world agriculture is concerned. Now, this is a prophecy in the Bible 2,000 years ago that said, this is out there. You know, God knows where all those things are. God knows precisely what the calculations are. He knows precisely when we will come into the orbit and run into contact with these things. This could be a comet, and in fact it probably is a comet with the multiple pieces of it that actually would come to Earth. So when I read this, I read something that is really as new as yesterday. Today's science, as a matter of fact, and yet it was written 2,000 years ago as a description of an incredible crisis. That is only the 6th seal. And it comes at a climax of world events that are disastrous, to say the very least, in their implications. All things that man has done to man. Wars, you know, and the wars that lead to famine, and the famine that leads to pestilence, and all the things that are done, the religious persecution, all of the violence that's going on among men, which Jesus said that the time would come that unless God intervened and stopped it, there would be no flesh saved alive. He is saying that man would manage to get rid of all life on this planet, whether the asteroids came or whether the asteroids didn't. In fact, it may turn out that the asteroids themselves are a factor in salvation. Then there is a pause while a category of people on this planet are marked by God for preservation. It's 144,000. That number, I think you can be absolutely certain, is symbolic and not real. And exactly how the symbolism works and what it means is hard to say. It probably is a number of completion until the fullness of it, the total number I want, until the whole package is put together. Don't hurt anything more until I have sealed the servants of our God in their forehead, and the 144,000 are sealed. Then the 7th seal is opened, chapter 8, verse 1. And there was silence in heaven for the space of about half an hour. Everything went completely quiet. And I saw 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. And another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer, and there was given to him much incense, that he should offer with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar which is before the throne of God. And I will tell you something. By the time we get to here, there will be a lot of prayers of the saints up there to provide incense by this time. Because I don't know where you will be, and I don't know where I will be, but you and I will be praying. We may be praying at the top of our voice wherever we are when this type of thing is beginning to come to pass. We will find a way to get to our knees. We will find a way to call out to God. We'll find a way that it will come all the way from our heart and from the center of our being to pray to God at that time. The smoke of their incense came up with the prayers of saints and ascended before God out of the angel's hand. And he took the censer, he filled it with fire on the altar, and threw it into the earth, and there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. And the 7 angels, which had the 7 trumpets, prepared themselves to sound. They are now going to put those to their lips, blow on the trumpet, and each time, each successive thing that they do opens up something new. All 7 of these trumpets now comprise the 7th seal. The first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth, and the third part of the trees was burnt up, and all green grass was burnt up. I've often wondered about this hail and fire. But you know, there is one way in which you get hail and fire, or something like hail, and that is with small meteorite shower again. Very small objects, small enough that they're only maybe the size of a marble or smaller by the time they actually get to the ground. But they are on fire, as any meteorite would be by the time it gets there. But a tiny, maybe even BB-sized one, by the time it hits the ground, will be burning brightly and cause enormous damage and set fires. The second angel sounded, as it were, a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and the third part of the sea became blood. The third part of the creatures were died in the sea that had life, and the third part of the ships were destroyed. I think what you have here again is a symbolism, perhaps, of a large meteorite hitting one of the seas, the ocean. And the result of that would be cataclysmic for all life in the area. When it says turns to blood, basically I think it means it died. Everything in it died at that point. And all the shipping in that area was destroyed at the same time. You know, it is almost as though God stands off with his shotgun with buckshot in it and decides that he's going to begin putting an end to some of this on earth, and begins to shower us with all kinds of stuff out of the heavens. And who knows, I mean, they have calculated, as far as they know, I thought that they were pretty sure when they found this one that was going to pass us by, what was it? They thought it was going to pass by about 230 miles or something like, no, a little further than that, about 2,300 miles. They found like it's more like 300,000 miles. Everybody breathes a sigh of relief that things are going to miss us. I thought, well, that means we're okay until 26 years out when that one was going to go by, because there's nothing else out there. And I was watching the show the other night, and it blew my mind right out again, because he said, no, we can only map and only have mapped a tiny little fraction of the sky where these things may come from. We could have one of these things come roaring at us tomorrow, because they have not been able to really go. You know, they have it's really an interesting piece of computer and telescope that they have. They are now doing this thing by computer and by telescope, because they map portions of the sky, and then the computer spots any spot of light that isn't where it's supposed to be on the next go-round, so that they can begin to pick these things out. But even with a computer working day and night, working hard to locate these things, they have still only located a fraction of the objects that are within some kind of problem area of Earth, and that doesn't deal with at all comets, which are out of our sight, which sometimes when they finally do come into sight, are only months away. Told you I'd need that. So we face, it is not surprising in a way that the sixth seal involves a major event, and then the first trumpet involves a lesser but still significant astral event. The third trumpet involves another large thing coming out of the sky, so that this doesn't it sort of fits with hitting an asteroid belt or something of this nature. The third angel sounded, and they found a great star from heaven, burning like a lamp, and it fell on the third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of waters. The name of the star is called Wormwood, and a third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died because of the fact that they became poison as a result of what came down. And when I originally read that, in reading these things, many years ago, this was in the early nuclear age when we looked at these, and we sort of imagined that what we were seeing here was man-made weapons coming out of the sky like something like a meteorite coming out of the sky, but that caused sort of this destruction, and that some of this might involve, first of all, nuclear weapons that killed off large portions of life, but then later also chemical and biological weapons. And there's an insanity in the world right now in the pursuit of weapons of mass destruction, and the fact that people are making weapons that can be carried in as something as small that you could hold in your hand, or you could tuck it in your purse. They could carry it to the water supply of a city like Dallas, and wherever that particular water supply went, kill everybody within a reasonable period of time from that one spot, because of the disease which could be put in the water. They can come in and fly over your town in a little airplane and release spores of anthrax. The problem is that as they begin to work with these things, and this is something a lot of scientists have been worrying about for a long time, once you let that genie out of the bottle, how can you be sure where it's going to go, how far it is going to go, how much damage it's going to cause? And then I watched, I've got to start watching the movies I watch, because I saw this one called Outbreak not long ago. Where they are, these fear, it generates as a result of the realization that some stupid little virus carried by monkeys in Africa can get a foothold somewhere and start wiping out people in their millions. These things are out there. In fact, scientists are concerned that they're not only out there, they are as certain as the meteorites are if science doesn't get ahead of them some way. So the world, what's the message? The message is that if your hope is in this world and where this world is going to go, you're on very shaky ground, and you need to be putting your hope on higher ground and planting it on a rock. The fourth angel sounded. The third part of the sun was smitten, the third part of the moon, the third part of the stars. So the third part of them was darkened, and the day didn't shine for a third part, and the night likewise. Don't know how that works or what could possibly it could mean. Then comes the fifth and sixth trumpets, and we have long felt that what these indicate are opportunistic foreign armies that begin to form up and that generate the king of the south pushing at the king of the north. The king of the north come rolling against the king of the south. And the description of machines of war, really, if John had seen, if he had actually transported John in time to Vietnam and asked him to write what he saw, some of it would sound very much like his description of some of the stuff we have in Revelation. Because John never saw a helicopter, John never saw a jet aircraft, John never saw a rocket, and any ability to describe these things would have been well beyond his ken, and anything except, well, it was sort of like a locust, a huge, giant locust. And it had stings in its tail. So, if you understand these things, you can realize that John is in vision. He's seeing stuff that no man has ever seen before, and all he can do is give you his best shot at describing it. Now, what this all seems to be about is preparation for the return of Christ, in the sense that, I say preparation for it, it isn't intended so much as a softening up for the return of Christ. What it is a climax of events, both nature and human caused, of events that would end in complete and utter destruction if it were not stopped. And then we come down to chapter 11, which starts off with an insert about the two witnesses, and I'm not going to take any time on that today, for time moves on. I'm going to take you to verse 15, when the seventh angel finally sounds. The seventh angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven saying, "The kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever." And the 420 elders stand before God and the people, fell on their faces and worshiped God, saying, "We give thanks, O Lord God Almighty, which are and were and art to come, because you have taken your great power and have reigned." It's pity in a way that we don't have a song and a hymnal to repeat words. The nations were angry, and your wrath is come, and the time of the dead that they should be judged, and that you should give reward to your servants the prophets and to the saints. Notice, you got two things at work. One of them is the nations were angry, and the great deal of destruction we're reading about in Revelation is from the nations. But your wrath is come. God's fury has come as well. He said, it's time to give reward to your servants, the prophets and the saints, and them that fear your name, small and great, and should destroy them that destroy the earth. There is a category of people called them here who seem to be in the process of destroying the earth, and it is only God and his power and his mercy that stops them. And the temple of God was opened in heaven, and there was seen in his temple the ark of his testament, and there were lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail. It's a time when nearly everything is brought to a stop. The seventh trumpet also includes the pouring out of 7 vials. They are vials of the wrath of God. Man, of course, has spent a lot of time trying to kill each other off down through the generations. And man has managed to come up with weapons of destruction which boggle the mind. And God, it seems, comes to a point in time where he says, enough. You want to see destruction? I will show you destruction. You want to see disease? I will show you disease. And God does what is necessary to finally, at long last, bring man to his knees. Because that's one place it seems that man most doesn't want to go. But there is another event that takes place here at this point in time. And it seems to take place before the vials of God's wrath are poured out. And it's back in 1 Corinthians, the 15th chapter. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. We used to talk a lot about the place of safety, and this one here is the ultimate. It is the ultimate safety from the ultimate destruction. 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 50. Now this I say, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God. Neither does corruption inherit incorruption. But I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. He's assuming at this point in time that there will be people, some of the people who read his letter will still be alive when these things take place, because John does not know the day or the hour. He has no idea that there's 2,000 years stretching out ahead of him before any of this comes to pass. And his presumption is that there will come a point in time at the end of these trumpets. Remember, he said, at the last trumpet. Where are you going to go in the Bible to find prophetically, some sequence of trumpets, if not Revelation? It's the only sequence I know of. And so it is all laid out before us. 6 successive trumpets, and then the last trumpet is blown. And he says at this time that the trumpet shall sound, the dead shall be raised, incorruptible, and we shall be changed. I think the description in 1 Thessalonians also says, with a shout of the archangel and the trump of God. For this corruptible must put on incorruption. This mortal must put on immortality. So when this corruptible shall have put on incorruption, and this mortal shall have put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory. That there will be a resurrection, a change to spirit life of all the saints of God before the 7 vials of God's wrath are poured out upon the earth. Now, if you'll turn back to Luke 12, finally, in verse 35. Here is a statement, I think, that speaks to us. It speaks to God's people in all generations. He tells this to the 12 apostles because of the singular task that lies ahead of them. But I don't think that we can ignore this, because it reaches down through all the generations and speaks to us as well. He said, let your loins be girded about and your lights burning. Stay up all night, he says, figuratively speaking. Keep the light on, keep your clothes in hand, and you yourselves like men who wait for their Lord, when he shall return from the wedding, so that when he comes and knocks, they may open to him immediately. Now, do you have the image? He said, keep the light on, keep your clothes on, and stay close at hand, so that when the knock comes, you can reach over and grab the door and open it, and your master will not have to stand outside in the rain or the cold or whatever elements that are there. So the master, from his point of view, he knocks on the door opens. That, he says, is what you need to be thinking about. Blessed are those servants whom the Lord, when he comes, shall find watching. Verily I say unto you, he will gird himself, make them sit down to me, and will come forth and serve him. If he come in the second watch, or if he come in the third watch, doesn't make, midnight, 3 o'clock in the morning, he'll find them ready for him. Blessed are those servants. If the good man of the house had known in what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not suffered his house to be broken through. So, be ready, for the Son of Man comes in an hour when you think not. You know, I can't help but think of that and look at the world around us, and with what I see as accelerating signs on every side, but you can't draw them on graphs, and you can't extrapolate them out, and you can't start making predictions about days and times. There's one other thing that, as I read through the prophets of the Old Testament, that worries me profoundly and very deeply, is that the description of the decay and the rot in Israel just before they went into captivity seems even worse than we are today. That the reservoir of goodwill and of good people and of generous and good-hearted people in Israel had gone far lower than it has gone in our country today. But our reservoir is drying up. I don't know of anyone who really would want to argue that particular point, that the reservoir of goodwill, the reservoir of good people, and of people who are willing to, give of themselves for other people, seems to me to be getting smaller by the day in our world. And the time will come when our cultural condition and our circumstances in our world will be just about like the ones we read in Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. We're there already. We're not, but we're headed that way as fast as we can go. And I know, as surely as I'm standing here in front of you, that the events described in these seals and in these trumpets lie ahead of us. And I think that they probably lie ahead of this generation. But then John thought the same thing. I will throw that in there because you aren't going to catch me setting any dates on this type of thing. What I think is the hardest job of all for us, though, it's easy when someone gets up in front of you and says, well, the Lord's going to be coming back here soon, and He's going to be here in the year 2002, and we've got to drive forward, we've got to push ahead. And if you believe this person, you strive hard and you work hard, do you realize how much easier that is than the task that we really have, which is ready no matter when it is? Now, we can't obviously stay up all night, every night. That is symbolism. That's an illustration of the importance that lies upon us of being ready. There is another parable where he says there were 10 virgins that were prepared for the wedding, and 5 of them were wise and 5 of them were foolish. The 5 that were wise took their lamps and took oil with them in another vessel. The 5 that were foolish just took their lamps and no extra oil. And they all slumbered and slept. So it's okay for you to sleep tonight in your bed. But the point was that there was one group of those who realized that the Master could come any time, and they had to be prepared if it took longer than they thought they had to be prepared by taking extra oil with them in their lamps. Now, you don't have to worry about oil and you don't have to worry about lamps. That's not the point. The point is, in your spiritual life, in your walk with God, in your study of the Bible, in the Spirit of God flowing through you and out, through the love of God flowing out to you to other people, this is something you have got to work at constantly. And there is no time when it's okay with God for you to let down. There is no time it's all right for Him to say, my Lord delays His coming. There is no time when you can begin to meld in with the world, be like the world, go along with the world, follow the world to hell in a handbasket. There is no time when that's all right. There is no interim in which you can go off and live the world's way and hopefully make it back just in the nick of time. Nothing like that.